Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Representatives from the Western Australia Police Force released shocking footage to the public this week, days after a man led officers on a dangerous high-speed chase in a stolen SUV. The whole thing began on the morning of March 13th, when the suspect, 30-year-old Matthew Ryan Allen, was spotted by police behind the wheel of a stolen white Mazda CX-5. Officers attempted to pull Allen over, however, instead of cooperating, he drove off, leading to a dramatic chase. The pursuit lasted roughly 40 minutes as Allen ripped through Perth's southern suburbs at a high rate of speed. Footage taken by a helicopter from the police force's air wing shows the 30-year-old as he weaves in and out of traffic, plows through highway medians, and drives on the wrong side of the road, narrowly avoiding other motorists. One part of the chase in particular was extremely dangerous. As you can see, after driving over some grass at the side of the highway, he sped directly into the parking lot of a car wash, even racing through one of the bays there. The place is usually busy with people, and it's easy to see how someone could have been killed. The whole thing finally came to an end shortly after this, when while ripping down another section of highway, Allen clipped a tree at the shoulder of the road. The impact sent the SUV rolling before it was disabled and came to a stop. Though Allen attempted to take off on foot following the crash, he was caught and arrested by officers shortly after. The 30-year-old is now facing a litany of charges, among them stealing a car and driving recklessly, failing to stop, driving without a license, driving with fake registration plates, and damaging property. He currently remains in custody. Authorities in Peru say that an investigation into a baffling series of burglaries took a bizarre and amusing turn this week, after what was initially thought to be the work of a criminal gang instead resulted in the capture of an unlikely suspect. According to local media sources, the whole thing started sometime last week, when police in the city of Ica began receiving multiple reports about break-ins from residents of the San Isidro housing complex. Over a period of several days, victims said that they had arrived home to find that their places had been ransacked. Because all of the incidents occurred at the same location, authorities theorized that they were looking for a group of thieves that were familiar with the area. However, there was something about the situation that didn't add up. You see, while furniture and other items were thrown around at all of the crime scenes, valuables had been left completely untouched. It left investigators scratching their heads. That was, until they started receiving new reports about a suspect that they had never considered. That suspect was a tufted capuchin monkey who was spotted by witnesses climbing buildings, running across rooftops, and scaling power lines in the area. Sure enough, when police did a little more searching, they managed to find the mischievous little guy hanging out in a tree. If you're wondering why everyone was so surprised, that's because capuchins are not native to this area. They live in the Amazon, whereas Ica is near the coast, roughly 170 miles south of the capital of Lima. Sadly, it seems that someone was keeping the capuchin as a pet. Based on marks around the animal's waist, police found that suggested it had been tied up. Because the monkey is too domesticated to be released into the wild, officials say it will either stay at the zoo where it was taken following its capture this week, or transferred to an animal sanctuary. Representatives from Japan's Tokyo Metropolitan Police say that a desperate 42-year-old man is in custody this week after he allegedly hunted down and fatally attacked a female live streamer who he said was avoiding him after failing to pay back a large debt. The whole thing unfolded shortly before 10 a.m. on March 11th, when the woman in question, 22-year-old Aidi Sato, was in Tokyo's Shinjuku ward. The young female streamer was broadcasting while walking through a residential area when suddenly she was attacked by the suspect, 42-year-old Kenichi Takano. Without a word, Takano allegedly walked up to Sato, pulled out a large hunting knife, and began stabbing and slashing. According to police, Sato suffered more than 30 injuries during the assault, including multiple fatal wounds to her neck and chest. She was rushed to a hospital after emergency responders were called. However, she was pronounced dead a short time later. As for Takano, he was arrested the same day on the street and was by no means shy about sharing his motive with investigators. He told police that Sato owed him more than 2.5 million yen, or roughly $17,000 US, and that she had been trying to avoid paying him back. Apparently, this is true. According to local media sources, Takano first started watching Sato's live streams sometime in early 2021. By the following summer, he began sending her a series of cash transfers, which he believed were loans after Sato claimed that she was struggling to pay her living expenses. Takano even began taking out loans of his own from consumer credit companies so that he could keep sending Sato money. In early 2023, though, things soured when Sato reportedly cut off contact. After this, Takano sued her and ended up winning in court, with a judge ordering her to pay him back the 2.5 million yen he loaned her. However, after giving him just a tiny fraction of the money, Sato apparently began avoiding Takano again. He now claims that he went to police in 2024 to complain that she was not meeting her legally obligated payments, but that nothing was done. Deciding to take matters into his own hands, Takano reportedly purchased the hunting knife used in this week's killing a couple of months ago. He then started tuning into Sato's streams and traveled to Tokyo after she made an announcement online that she was going to be streaming in Shinjuku. Following his arrest this week, Takano told police, quote, "I thought the world would know what she had done if I created an incident and a trial was held." Well, it definitely seems that he got his wish, but it appears it came at the cost of his freedom. At the time of this recording, he remains in custody and is awaiting formal charges. Authorities in the German state of Thüringen say that a 46-year-old woman is fighting for her life in a hospital this week after she was horrifically set on fire while riding transit, an incident that is believed to be a chilling act of domestic violence. The incident unfolded on the morning of March 16th aboard a streetcar in the city of Gera. The victim, a 46-year-old mother of two named Dariani, was reportedly on her way to the local Greek restaurant where she worked as a cook when out of nowhere she was ambushed. After being approached by a man who was also riding the streetcar, Dariani was sprayed with a flammable liquid. She barely had time to shield her face before the attacker set her on fire. Passengers were quick to react and pulled the emergency alarm, prompting the streetcar's driver to spring into action. The driver grabbed an extinguisher from their operating booth and put out the flames before calling for help. While these decisive actions are credited with saving Dariani's life, she still had to be flown by helicopter to a hospital due to the extent of her injuries. Doctors say that she suffered severe and life-threatening burns and is still currently in critical condition. Unfortunately, an unintended side effect of the emergency alarm being pulled was that it also allowed the attacker to escape. He ran off before police could arrive, prompting a manhunt. That being said, it didn't take long to identify the suspect as Dariani's husband, Tangizi Kakiashvili. The man, who is also 46 years old and originally from the country of Georgia, remained on the run for approximately 24 hours before finally turning himself in to police shortly after the apartment where he and Dariani lived was raided by investigators. At the time of this recording, no official motive behind the awful crime has been revealed. However, several German media outlets have released details about Dariani and Tangizi's supposedly troubled relationship. According to these reports, Tangizi had problems with alcohol that caused him to lose both his job and his driver's license, after which he sat around at home all day while Dariani worked 6 days a week to support the family. As you might imagine, Dariani apparently grew tired of her husband's behavior and recently began trying to leave the relationship. This reportedly led to a previous violent encounter in which Tangizi allegedly held a knife to Dariani's throat and threatened to kill her. However, after this, he fled their shared residence. A family acquaintance told reporters that Dariani had gone to live with her daughter temporarily, and that they and other relatives believed that Tangizi had gone back to Georgia. That was until this week, when he allegedly tried to kill her on the streetcar. Currently, the 46-year-old suspect remains in custody and is expected to be charged with attempted murder. No further updates have been given about Dariani's condition at this time. A pair of Thai tourists very nearly ended up in a dark situation this week after they arrived in a foreign country for what was supposed to be the start of a vacation, only to realize there had been a pretty alarming mix-up. The whole thing started sometime on March 14th, when the tourists, an unidentified husband and wife, caught 2 flights. The first was from their home in the province of Surat Thani to the capital of Bangkok. The second was to Japan, where they had planned to spend the next few days sightseeing and enjoying themselves. However, after landing at Japan's Narita airport, the couple realized that something was wrong. Strangely, they were having a hard time getting into one of their 2 pieces of luggage. Their red bag was fine, but the black one seemed to be locked, even though they couldn't remember doing this before they left. When they forced the bag open, they soon realized why. You see, this wasn't their bag. Not only that, but this piece of luggage was filled with more than 50 pounds of marijuana. Just for reference, weed is very illegal in Japan. According to a customs brochure we found online, possession alone can get you imprisoned for up to 5 years, and an amount like this, which would definitely be considered trafficking, could result in a sentence of 10 years or more. Making matters more concerning for the couple, this was their very first time they had ever traveled outside of Thailand, and their daughter was the one who had planned almost the entire trip. However, luckily they were with a tour guide, and he was able to help them navigate the situation. It turned out that when the couple got off their first flight in Bangkok, they grabbed the wrong black suitcase from the baggage carousel. The suitcase full of weed actually belonged to a man who was headed to South Korea. This man apparently did report the mix-up before the couple flew out to Japan, but because all of their booking information was under their daughter's name, no one caught the situation in time. Instead, they and the big bag of cannabis ended up going all the way to Japan. Even after figuring all of this out, it was still a risk actually trying to explain all of this to Japanese customs. I mean, you've got to imagine that these people have heard every excuse in the book when it comes to drugs, and the "that's not my bag" routine is probably the least convincing sounding argument there is. It's like if your dog really did eat your homework. Good luck getting anyone to believe you. Still, the couple and the tour guide decided honesty was really the only choice they had, so they went to customs and alerted them to what had happened. Unsurprisingly, they and their tour guide were held for questioning, but after more than 9.5 hours, it seems officials were satisfied that this really was a mix-up and let them go. When it was all over, the tour guide posted about the whole situation on his Facebook page. Among many other things, he said it was a real lesson in the importance of really keeping track of and knowing your bags whenever you're traveling. It's unclear if police are conducting any kind of additional investigation or are pursuing charges against the actual owner of the suitcase full of weed. A massive Chinese restaurant chain is apologizing to customers and offering substantial refunds and compensation this week after they were recently the victims of a stomach-churning food tampering crime that went viral across the country's social media. The whole thing began sometime in the early morning hours of February 24th, when 2 17-year-old boys, identified only by the names Tang and Wu, went to a Haidilao hot pot location in the city of Shanghai. For those unfamiliar, hot pot is a staple of many East Asian cuisines and consists of one or more communally shared broths at a table. Diners use the flavored broths to cook and eat various ingredients, such as thinly sliced meats, vegetables, rice cakes, noodles, basically whatever you can think of. Anyway, while Tang and Wu were in one of the restaurant chain's private rooms, staff apparently weren't watching as closely as they should have been, because after getting extremely drunk, the teens started peeing in their broth, filming the whole thing, and posting it on social media. As you might imagine, people were extremely grossed out by this, especially when it came to light that Haidilao had no idea what had happened. It wasn't until 4 days later that they became aware of the situation after the disgusting video went viral, and it took them another week to actually figure out which location it had happened at. While broths, utensils, and other equipment are only used by groups of diners at their own table during a given meal, the company couldn't be sure that they had thoroughly disinfected the exact cookware Tang and Wu had peed in. So to try and make it up to horrified customers, Haidilao say that they are now offering full refunds and cash back to more than 4,000 people. The business revealed this week that anyone who ate at this specific location in Shanghai's Huangpu district between February 24th and March 8th is entitled to a refund plus compensation equaling 10 times the amount of whatever their bill was. They also say that they have implemented new safety measures to prevent a situation like this from happening again in the future. That's no small task either. You see, Haidilao operates more than 1,400 restaurants in 15 countries. I have to say, I personally find this to be a relief, as I ate at Heidi Lau here in Toronto like a month ago. I'm happy to report that I did not notice any notes of piss in my broth, though all the same, it's nice to know steps are being taken to protect diners. All jokes aside, Heidi Lau is actually a super awesome place, and you should definitely try it if you get the chance. If you do, be sure to try the tableside hand-pulled noodles. It's quite an experience. Anyway, as for Tang and Wu, they were arrested by local police shortly after all of this happened. It's unclear exactly what charges they will be facing, but authorities say that in addition to being held in preventative detention, the teens are also now facing a lawsuit from the hot pot giant. Representatives from England's Cheshire police say that an elderly child predator has finally been held accountable for his horrifying crimes this week, after he was convicted of dozens of offenses following nearly 3 decades on the run. According to reports, between 1968 and 1995, Richard Burrows sexually assaulted and abused at least 24 young boys across the areas of Cheshire, the West Midlands, and West Mercia. The crimes occurred first while Burrows was working as a scout leader, then later as a children's home care worker, but all of them followed a similar pattern. The predator would befriend the young victims, making connections with them through their personal interests and hobbies. Once he had gained the trust of them and their families, he would use the position of power to commit horrific acts for sexual gratification. Because many of Burrows' victims were too terrified to come forward when the crimes first occurred, it wasn't until the mid-1990s that he was finally exposed for what he was. Following a large-scale investigation, he was arrested and charged in the spring of 1997. Despite the seriousness of the accusations against him, following an initial court appearance after his arrest, Burrows was released on bail ahead of his trial. By the time that trial was scheduled to begin in December of that year, he had vanished. For well over 2 decades, police searched for Burrows, though no trace of him could be found. He was placed on wanted lists, and his image was featured in crime shows released to the public, hoping that someone might recognize him. However, these tactics also came up short. Then, in the spring of 2023, authorities made an unexpected breakthrough when members of the investigative team decided to try something new. You see, like in many cases, police had periodically been creating age-progressed photos of Burrows, which they had been circulating. But someone got the brilliant idea to use one of these age-progressed photos and feed it into a piece of facial recognition software. The software in question is called PIM Eyes, and it's available for anyone to use. Basically, the program crawls the internet looking for images that it thinks are a facial match. In this case, the technique returned a hit to a name police had never heard before: Peter Smith. However, there was no mistaking it. Peter Smith was actually Richard Burrows. It turned out that for the last 2.5 decades, Burrows had been living on the Thai island of Phuket. He had stolen the identity of Peter Smith from a terminally ill friend and had gone on to hide in plain sight in Thailand's large British expat community. Burrows had done quite well in the country and had gone on to make many connections and have multiple successful careers. Disturbingly, it's now alleged he may have also gone on to continue his predatory behavior in Thailand and was known to constantly be living with young men there. By the time police located Burrows, though, his fortunes had taken a turn for the worse. He had run out of money, had been living in a converted shipping container, and was in poor health. In fact, before police could move in to arrest the now 80-year-old, they received word from their counterparts in Thai law enforcement and the National Crime Agency that Burrows was planning to come back to the UK on his own. Authorities let him book his own trip back, thinking he was in the clear, then pounced on him as soon as he arrived at London's Heathrow Airport in March of 2024. After 27 long years, this week, Burrows was finally forced to face the music for his awful actions. Between 2 court appearances, he pleaded guilty to a total of 97 offenses, including indecent assault of boys, indecency with a child, possession of indecent images, possessing false identity documents, and many, many other sexual assault-related charges. Perhaps the most infuriating part of the whole case is the fact that Burrows apparently feels no empathy or remorse whatsoever for any of his victims. In emails uncovered by police, he reportedly wrote about how he had spent the last 3 decades living in paradise and never once reflected on what he had done. In a statement this week, a representative for the case said in part, quote, While his victims will never be able to forget what happened to them, I hope that the fact that Burroughs has now been held accountable will finally provide them with some closure. Sadly, 4 of his victims have now passed away and so did not get to see justice served. This case is a warning. No matter how long you hide, we will find you and you will face justice. Burroughs is scheduled to be sentenced next month. Authorities in the Brazilian state of Mato Grosso say that they are working to piece together all of the details of an absolutely heinous crime this week, after a young woman allegedly lured a pregnant teen to her home for the purposes of murdering her and stealing her baby. The whole thing started sometime recently when the victim, 16-year-old Emily Sana, was contacted by a 25-year-old woman named Natalie Pereira. During conversations over WhatsApp, Pereira claimed that she had a bunch of extra baby clothes and other items she wasn't using, and that Emily could have them if she wanted. Emily graciously accepted, and last week she traveled to Pereira's home in the city of Cuiabá. Sadly, what she didn't realize was that she was walking into a horrifying trap. Sometime after she arrived and went inside, the 16-year-old was reportedly attacked by Pereira, who put her in a chokehold until she passed out. After she was unconscious, Pereira restrained her with electrical cables. What happened next is something out of a horror movie. As Emily laid there completely helpless, Pereira began slicing her open so that she could remove her unborn baby. It's now alleged that Emily woke up while this was happening and spent her last terrifying moments fighting for her life. Heartbreakingly, she died of blood loss as Pereira successfully cut her baby from her body. Afterwards, the 25-year-old allegedly buried the teen in a shallow grave she pre-dug in her backyard. The following day, March 13th, Pereira showed up at a local hospital with her husband, 28-year-old Christian de Arruda, and tried to pass off the newborn as hers. The couple claimed that Pereira had given birth to their baby at home. However, this story fell apart when hospital staff became suspicious and began investigating further. After some exams, they called police when they determined that Pereira had not delivered the baby. When authorities conducted a search of Pereira and Arruda's home, they found the shallow grave with Emily's body and realized what they were dealing with. During subsequent questioning, things got even more twisted. Following her arrest, Pereira not only apparently gave a full and chilling accounting of the murder, she also explained why she had lured Emily to her house in the first place. The 25-year-old explained that she had recently suffered 2 miscarriages, the last of which occurred approximately 6 months earlier. Instead of informing her family about what had happened, though, she stated that she had continued to pretend that she was pregnant, hoping she could steal a baby to pass off as her own. While police say that they are still investigating Pereira's husband Arruda and 2 other suspects, it's unclear to what extent anyone else was actually involved in the crime. For her part, Pereira apparently claimed she planned and carried all of it out by herself, and that her husband had no idea the baby wasn't his when they took it to the hospital. Disturbingly, police say that they are also looking into another unsettling aspect of the case. You see, Pereira has 3 other children, and they are now conducting DNA testing to make sure those children are actually hers. At the time of this recording, those tests are still ongoing, and Pereira remains in custody. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.